How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf, Daf 100 of Masechtas Zevachim. Friends, oh boy. Daf Kuf. First of all, friends, Daf Kuf. Can you imagine? We've learned 100 pages of Masechtas Zevachim. Oh boy. It's so crazy. Usually Daf Kuf, I feel like I usually point this out, that usually Daf Kuf is like a turning point. It's like by the time you get, Bava Kama, let's say, 120 pages, 119 pages, I think, right? Zvachim is 120 pages. It's like Bava Kama, by the time you get up to Daf Kuf, the end is in sight. You could see, it's like you're mamish, like you're in wrap-up mode. You're like, the end is in sight. It's exciting. Over here, I can't even think about the end. He's like, oh yeah, right, Kuf. Oh yeah, I guess we're getting close to the end. This is like unbelievable. Not in a bad way. Just in an unbelievable way. How just the intensity of Masechtas Zevachim just does not let up. This daf is going to be a doozy, absolute doozy. Now, okay. Well, with that to say, but I also want to point out that Chavik, can you imagine what an accomplishment that is? At Babble on Talmud is for like the regular people. The regular, really special, amazing, unique, mind-blowing people, but the regular, special, unique, mind-blowing, regular people. Like the Babble on Talmud people were just simple, good people that are willing to show up every day and put in the work and get to Daf Kuf of Masechtas Zevachim. It's unbelievable. Masechtas Zevachim is something else. It's also interesting because, the Gemara that I'm learning from, it has Masechtas Zevachim and Masechta Menachos in it. So, you don't even, feel like you're getting to the end of the Masechta because there's, a whole nother Masechta behind it. Today's daf discusses Aninus at night. Aninus Laila, whether it's D'Oraisa, whether it's D'Rabbanan. It's a massive daf. We have half of Daf Tzadi Tesamud Beis to do. Now, even though it's a massive daf, I really just put it into kind of one topic, which is Aninus at night, and it's going to go in all sorts of directions and levels of intensity. But the one real common theme though is Aninus at night, Midaraisa, Midarabanan, with a particular focus on Reb Shimon's opinion, who says Darabanan, and trying to exactly figure out Reb Shimon's opinion. Anyways, Chevre, let us jump into Daf Kuf. Oh, and also, friends, it's my birthday today. So I want to bless all of the friends here at Babble on Talmud, all of the best friends, the most amazing friends here at Babble on Talmud, that I bless you all to finish Masechtas Zevachim. And I bless you all that in the zchus of Limud Torah and the zchus of showing up every single day and putting in the work and the tears and the sweat, that mamish your lives are just full and overflowing with blessing and with light. Friends, let's learn Daf Kuf of Masechtas Zevachim. Friends, Daf Kuf begins on Daf Tzadi Tesamud Beis, or at least we're going to start it on Daf Tzadi Tesamud Beis, really about halfway through the Amud. About halfway through the Amud, it says, Man Tana Aninus Laila Mid'Rabbanan. Okay, we had learned yesterday a Mishnah from Masechta Psachim. And that Mishnah says, Onayn tovel ve'ochel es pischol ha'erev. Avalo b'kodshim. That the Mishnah in Psachim says that in Onayn, of course, an Onayn is a person whose relative has passed away and has not yet been buried. Okay, a person's relative has passed away, and that's not really inaccurate. No, that's not really inaccurate. There's something about Onayn that just feels so tricky. I think because it is. But be'etzim, okay, when a person's relative passes away, immediately they become an Onayn. The relative has not yet been buried yet. And anyways, that first day, regardless of if the relative is buried or not, is Aninus Midoraisa. Everybody agrees with that. That's not controversial. The day that the person passes away, the relatives, the immediate relatives, are Onayn's mideoraisa. Where things start getting controversial is that beginning that night. So, if somebody passed away on a Tuesday, comes Tuesday night already, it's a shaila. Is Aninus mideoraisa or is Aninus mideorabonon? Everyone says that there is Aninus laila. It's a question of, is Aninus laila mideoraisa mideorabonon? Now comes the next day already. Again, everybody agrees comes the next day. Everyone agrees comes the next day. Aninus is only mideorabonon. Everyone agrees comes the next day. Aninus is only mideorabonon. And I believe everybody also agrees that Aninus mideorabonon is also going to extend until the person is buried, whether it's the next day, whether it's 10 days from then. If it's 10 days from then, you'll be an Onayn for 10 days. I think everybody agrees with that as well. Mideorabonon. The first day is the Oraisa. Then until the person is buried, then there's Aninus mideorabonon. At least lefi this Gemara. Now let's say 10 days later, the relative is buried. So now it's a shaila. That night, so let's say 10 days later, so if the person died on a Tuesday, so 10 days later is probably something like a Thursday, let's say, or a Friday. So well, let's not worry about Shabbat. Thursday, let's just say, whether it's 10 days or 9 days or whatever it is. So if the following Thursday, the person is buried, so then there's a shaila of what about Thursday night? Is there Aninus laila d'Rabbanan on what's called the Yom Kvura? Let me also point out that there's Yom Misa and Yom Kvura. Yom Misa is that first day, the day that the person passes away. Yom Kvura is the day that they're buried. Yom Kvura could also be Yom Misa, but usually if we're talking about Yom Misa, we're talking about the first day. And Yom Kvura is any day beginning with the second day, the day that they are buried. So Yom Kvura could be the second day, Yom Kvura could be the 10th day. So then the question is, the night following the Yom Kvura, so if they're buried the following Thursday, so then that Thursday night, is there any Aninus? There wouldn't be Aninus mideoraisa. Nobody says there will be Aninus mideoraisa. The question is, would there be Aninus mideorabonon the night following the Kvura? That is also up for discussion. So, okay. So therefore, that having been said, what is Aninus? Aninus is that when somebody passes away, right? So if Reuven's father Yaakov passes away, on the Yom HaMisa, the day that Yaakov passes away, Reuven is in Onayn. Mideoraisa, that's as far as I'm aware, that is non-controversial. The night following, so if it's a Tuesday, so then Tuesday night, this is already where there's machlokes. We're going to see it's machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda says that Aninus Laila on the first night is also midoraisa. Rabbi Shimon says it is midorabonon. We're going to see the opinion of Rebbe later, but let's leave him out of it for now. Now, if Yaakov was not buried on Tuesday, but rather Yaakov was buried on Wednesday, so then the Yom Kvura is Wednesday. So on Wednesday, Reuven is going to be, right, Yaakov died. Reuven on Wednesday is going to be an Onayn midirabonon the whole day on Wednesday, at least the Fidus Gemara. And the Shaila then becomes Wednesday night, the night following the Yom Kvura, is there Aninus midirabonon or not? Okay, now, says the Gemara, Mantana Aninus Lala midirabonon. So now, regarding that Mishnah in Masechta Psachim that says, Onayn tova v'ochel es pischol erev avalo bakachim. So we had said that. So in Onayn, assuming that we're talking about the Yom HaMisa. Let's assume that we're talking about it's a Shaila, it's the Yom HaMisa, the Yom HaKvur. Let's assume it's talking about the Yom HaMisa. Okay? And we're saying that in Onayn, right, so Reuven, Yaakov dies on a Tuesday. Tuesday is also Yud-Dal at Pesach, is also Yud-Dal at Nisan, is Erev Pesach. And Yaakov dies. And we're saying that Reuven can already eat Korban Pesach that night, the night following the Yom HaMisa. Let's assume. Now, it just doesn't have to be the Yom HaMisa, but regardless, the Gemara there, Masechta Psachim, regardless of if we're saying that Yaakov is buried on the Yom HaMisa or Yom HaKvura, obviously if he's buried on the Yom HaMisa, the Yom HaKvura is also the Yom HaMisa, but the point being referring to Yom HaMisa as the same day that he died, or the Yom HaKvura being a different day that he died, and that day was only the day that he was buried, but didn't die on that day. Anyways. So the Gemara there, Masechta Psachim, the Gemara there, and Daf Tzadi Beis of Masechta Psachim says that the author of that Mishnah holds that Aninus is midorabanan, it's not midoraisa. And now the Gemara wants to know that being the case, that the Mishnah in Pesachim that says that an Onayn eats Korban Pesach that night, the Tana of that Mishnah holds that Aninus is midorabanan, as the Gemara says there in Masechta Pesachim. Who is that Tana? Okay, great. I told you it's going to be a long daf. Where are we at? How many? We at like 7 minutes already, and we still haven't even started the first line. This is going to be a doozy of a daf. Man Tana Aninus Laila midorabanan. So who is this Tana who says that Aninus Laila is midorabanan? Reb Shimoni, the answer is it's Reb Shimon. The Sanya that we learned in the Brisa, Aninus Laila midivrei Torah, divrei Reb Yehuda, Reb Shimon Omer, Onayn Eino midivrei Torah midivrei Sofrim. Reb Yehuda says that Aninus Laila on the first night is midoraisa. According to Reb Yehuda, Yaakov dies on a Tuesday. That Tuesday is the Yom Hamisa. Ruvain is an Onayn midoraisa, and the following night, Tuesday night, also Ruvain is an Onayn midoraisa. Reb Shimon disagrees and says that while Tuesday, the Yom Hamisa, Ruvain will be an Onayn midoraisa. However, Tuesday night, Ruvain is an Onayn midorabanan. Teda, and says Reb Shimon, you should know, Sharei Amru, that they said Onayn tova v'ochas pischol erev. Reb Shimon argues to Reb Yehuda. He says, look, an Onayn can eat the Korban Pesach that night, Tuesday night already. Right? Yaakov died on a Tuesday night already. Ruvain is eating Korban Pesach. Now, if Aninus was midoraisa, then we assume that he would not be eating Korban Pesach if he's an Onayn midoraisa. Right? Onayn tova v'ochas pischol erev v'alo b'kachim, but not other kachim. And we want to assume that is because we understand that that's because Aninus Laila is midorabanan, and we say that Korban Pesach, which is a mitzvah's essay with the chiyuv kares, overrides the derabanan of Aninus Laila. However, in terms of other korbanos that are not the Korban Pesach, he would not eat those korbanos at night, as he is an Onayn midorabanan. V'savar Reb Shimon Aninus Laila midorabanan. Okay, so now comes the big question, Cheva. This big question is going to stand with us essentially, really, till the end of the daf. Essentially, maybe till like the middle of Kufam at Beis. I mean, this is a big question that we're raising now. Big question that we're raising now. We're going to have all sorts of answers. Some more complex, some less complex. Mostly more complex. Here we go. V'savar Reb Shimon Aninus Laila midorabanan. Does Reb Shimon really hold that Aninus Laila is midorabanan? V'atana, we learn in the Brisa, Reb Shimon says, Reb Shimon, Onayn eino mishaleach korbanosa. That an Onayn does not send any korbanos. He doesn't make a shaliach to send korbanos. I think this came up earlier in Masechta Zevachim, maybe even Masechta Horius, I don't know, but this came up somewhere about being mishaleach korbanosav, I think. Anyways, so Onayn eino mishaleach korbanosav, says Reb Shimon. My lava filu b'Pesach. We want to assume that that's even the Korban Pesach. The Reb Shimon is saying that an Onayn would not make a shaliach even to slaughter his Korban Pesach for him. Now, why is an Onayn not doing the mitzvah of Korban Pesach? Mistama, because Aninus is midoraisa lo levar mi Pesach. No. He can't make a shaliach to offer other korbanos, but Korban Pesach he can make a shaliach to offer for him, because on Aninus Laila is midei rabbanon, and therefore he would eat the Korban Pesach. Via Tanya, we learn in the Brisa, Reb Shimon says, Reb Shimon shlamim kishu shalim mevi venu mevi kishu onayn. That a korban shlamim requires that the offerer, that the owner, be shalem, be whole, be in a positive, wholesome mental state, not somebody who's mourning, not somebody who freshly lost a relative and is an Onayn. An Onayn does not bring a korban shlamim. Minayin the Rabbis is atoda. How do I know that this isn't limited to korban shlomim, but that an onayn does not offer a korban toda either? Because shalmei simcha, that when by the shalosh regalim the Yidden come to Eretz Yisrael, Be'ezrat Hashem, the next regel coming up is Pesach. I look forward to seeing everybody here in Yerushalayim. Somebody said to me, I was at a Shabbos Suda, and somebody asked about, is there going to be korbanos, during the time of Mashiach? Is there going to be korbanos? Are we going to still have korbanos? I'm telling you, after learning Masechta Zevachim, I don't see how there could not be korbanos. There's a whole seder, there's a whole seder kachim which is full of halachas of all the different kinds of korbanos. It's almost like it would be like a letdown. I think I responded something like, anybody's going to ask that question has never learned Masechta Zevachim. Regardless of if they're going to actually be korbanos in the future, animal sacrifice in the future or not, I don't know. But what I can say is that that isn't a question that I take lightly after all of the effort that has gone into understanding korbanos over the past 3.5 months or whatever. Just to say nonchalantly, maybe we're not going to have korbanos. We're not going to have korbanos after all this. What are we going to replace it with? A whole seder of freaking like vegetables or something? There's a lot of Gemara that has to be written for whatever the replacement is going to be. Al Koponim. Diana, what do you think? Diana, I think you brought up in the past about maybe I think maybe years ago. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, Diana, you're a vegan, right? No. So what do you think? First of all, by the way, there's going to be a machlokes on today's daf about do you actually have to eat the korban pesach. By the way, so even if you don't want to eat the korban pesach, there's a machlokes of if you have to actually eat it or not. I think you probably do, but yeah. But Diana, I think you had mentioned in the past, you raised the shaila about are there going to be animal sacrifices in the future? How do you feel about that now? After toiling so much in Masechta Zevachim, do you kind of just wish that there was animal sacrifices just because we're ready for it? So the rabbis told so Ma'amini is told the shekain nechelas b'simcha kishlom. That comes to the Beis Hamikdash on the Shalosh Regalim. We're going to bring shalmei simcha, korban shlomim for simchas, and todas are a type of shlomim first of all, and they're brought as at joyous occasions. So so therefore, just like a korban shlomim would be offered in a wholesome state of mind, so would a korban toda. Minayin l'rabbos is a ola. How do I know the same applies to an ola, that an onayn would not offer korban ola? My banias ola shekain ba b'neder v'nedave kishlomim. Just like a shlomim can be offered as a neder or a nedava, a person can pledge to bring a korban shlomim, so too can a person pledge to bring a korban ola, and therefore korban olas also would not be offered by onains. Minayin l'rabbos b'chor u'maiser u'pesach. How do I know that also an onayn does not offer a b'chor, a maiser, or a pesach? My ba'ani b'chor u'maiser u'pesach shkein einan boin al chet kishlomim. That just like a shlomim is not brought for sins, so also b'chor, maiser, and pesach are not brought for sins, and therefore just like the shlomim is not offered by an onayn, so too b'chor, maiser, and pesach are not offered by onains. Minayin l'rabbos chatas v'osham. How do I know that the same applies to korban chatas? So korban osham, they are not offered by onains. Talmud Omer zevach. It says in that pasuk zevach shlomim, a sacrifice of a shlomim to include all sacrifices, even chatas and oshams. Minayin l'rabbos ha'ofis. What about birds, v'amenochis, and flower offerings? V'yayin v'eitzim v'alavona. Somebody who donates wine, wood to the Beis Hamikdash, frankincense, How do we know that these also would not be offered by an Onayn? Talmud Omar, Shlomim Korbanu. It says, right, Zevach Shlomim Korbanu, called Korbanus Shehu, maybe all Korbanus that one brings, all offerings that one brings, Kishu Shalim, maybe Venu, maybe Kishu Onayn, he brings those Korbanus when he is Shalem, when he's in a wholesome state of mind, and not when he is in Onayn. Katani Mias, Pesach, in that whole big brisa, was included Korban Pesach. We had said that Meiser, Bechor, Meiser, and Pesach would not be offered by an Onayn. So, and this is Reb Shimon's brisa, right? It says, right, Vatani Reb Shimon Omer. This is Reb Shimon. So how do we shtim these two things? On the one hand, we're saying that the author of the Mishnah in Psachim that says that an Onayn does eat a Korban Pesach is according to the opinion who says that Aninus is midrabanon, and we saw Bryce said that that's Reb Shimon who says Aninus is midrabanon, and therefore an Onayn does eat the Korban Pesach, and yet we're saying that an Onayn does not offer a Korban Pesach because he's not in a wholesome state of mind. That says Rav Chizde, Korban Pesach doesn't really belong on that list, because Korban Pesach and Onayn would actually offer. Okay. Rav Sheshes Omer says, Rav Sheshes, my Pesach Shalmei Pesach. So Rav Sheshes says that when it says Pesach on that list, it doesn't mean the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach and Onayn would offer. It means Shalmei Pesach. That, of course, at the Pesach Seder, if you have a lot of people at the Pesach Seder, so everyone's only getting a little bit of the Korban Pesach. What's the main meal going to be? Not the Korban Pesach. Chagigas Yudalid. You bring Korban Shlomims. And you have these Korban Shlomims, and that's people are gonna eat meat from the Korban. So in addition to the Korban Pesach, you also have the Chagigas Yudal, these other, what we're calling here Shalmei Pesach. Those would not be offered by an Onayn. That's what we're talking about. But the Korban Pesach would be offered by Onayn. Yachi Hainu Shlomim, but isn't Shalmei Pesach just regular Shlomim? Technically, yes, but Tana Shlomim Aboin Machmas Pesach, Vatana Shlomim Aboin Machmas Atzman. Yes, on that list are regular Korban Shlomims as well as these Chagigas Yudalids for the Seder night. The Lo Tana Shlomim Aboin Machmas Pesach, because if we would not have Shlom Aboin Machmas Pesach on that list, Sagadaitech Amino, I may have thought whole Machmas Pesach also Kigufe de Pesach Damu Kamashmalan. I may have thought, well, since they're being brought and eaten at the Seder, just like the Korban Pesach is offered and eaten at the Seder, I might have thought that just like the Korban Pesach is offered by Onayn, so also these Shalmei Pesach are also offered by Onayns. The answer is they are not, and that is why they are included on the list. And therefore, when it says Pesach, according to Rav Sheshes on that list, it is a reference to the Shalmei Pesach, to the Chagigas Yud Dalid. Those would not be offered by an Onayn, but the Korban Pesach itself would be offered by an Onayn. Okay, finally, we are getting up to Daf Kuf of Masechta Zevachim. Gonna drink a little water. Okay, Rav Mari Omar says, Rav Mari Lokasha, it is no question. Kansha Meislo, Meis biyud dalid, v'kover biyud dalid. Kansha Meis lo, Meis biyud gimel, v'kover biyud dalid. Okay, says Rav Mari, it depends. So Yud Dalid, we're going to call it Tuesdays. Yud Dalid is Erev Pesach. The Seder night is Tuesday night. So if Yud Dalid, if Tuesday, so it depends if Tuesday, if Erev Pesach is Yom HaMisa, and also Yom HaKvura, right? Did Yaakov die on Tuesday and was also buried on Tuesday? Was Tuesday the Yom HaMisa, or was it merely the Yom HaKvura? Was Yaakov buried on Tuesday, but he died on Monday? And there's an afkamina. Rav Mari is going to argue that if Yom HaMisa was on Tuesday, right, Yudal was Yom HaMisa, so then Aninus at night, Aninus Laila, Rav Mari argues, right, this is all explaining Reb Shimon's Shita, right? So Rav Mari argues that Reb Shimon would hold that if Yudalid was Yom HaMisa, Aninus Laila would be, according to Reb Shimon, D'oraisa. And therefore, that's why the Brisa says that the Korban Pesach would not be offered. That's in a scenario where Yud Daled was Yom HaMisa. But if Yud Daled was Yom HaKvura, if Yaakov died on Yud Gimel and was only buried on Yud Daled, therefore argues Rav Mari that Reb Shimon would say that Yud Daled at night, Seder night, would only be Aninus Midrabanon, and that's what the Mishnah in Psachim is talking about, where it says that the Onayn would participate in the Korban Pesach. Again, Rav Mari Omer says, Rav Mari lo kasha kan shemeis lo meis be Yud Daled v'kavru be Yud Daled. If Yud Daled is Yom HaMisa, right? So one scenario is talking about where Yud Daled is Yom HaMisa. Kan shemeis lo meis be Yud Gimel v'kavru be Yud Daled. The other scenario is where Yaakov died on Yud Gimel and Yom Akvura was on Yud Daled. Meis lo meis be Yud Daled v'kavru be Yud Daled. When Yud Daled is Yom HaMisa, that means that Yaakov died and was buried on Yud Daled. So then that means that Rav Mari wants to argue that Reb Shimon would hold that Seder night, Ruvain is an Onayn Mida Oraisa. Yom Misa Tofes Leilo Mida Oraisa. And therefore, Seder night, Ruvain is an Onayn Mida Oraisa and would not participate in the Korban Pesach. Meis lo meis b'Yud Gimel. However, if Yaakov died on Yud Gimel, v'karva b'Yud Daled, and was buried on Yud Daled, so the Yud Daled was Yom HaKvura, Yom Kvura d'Rabbanon, Eino Tofes Leilo Ela Midrabbanon. So Yom Kvura itself, as we discussed earlier, right? Since Yaakov died on Yud Gimel, so Aninus D'oraisa is on Day Yud Gimel. Day Yud Daled, even though Yaakov hasn't yet been buried, Aninus on Yud Daled is only Midrabbanon, and Aninus at the Pesach Seder that night, argues Rav Mari, that Reb Shimon would say is Aninus Midrabbanon. That when Reb Shimon is talking about Aninus Midrabbanon, he's talking about the Aninus Laila of Yom Kivura. And in that case, Ruvain would participate in the Korban Pesach. Amle Rav Ashi Rav Mari, but Rav Ashi asked Rav Mari a question, then that means Be'etzim is really agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda, right? We saw Machlokes at the beginning of today's daf. Rabbi Yehuda says Aninus Laila is Midoraisa, Reb Shimon says Aninus Laila is Midorabanan. You, Rav Mari, just said that when does Reb Shimon say Aninus Laila is Midorabanan? On Yom Kivura. Not the day that Ruvain died, on the day that Yaakov died. On Yom Kivura, you're saying, Rav Mari, you're saying that Reb Shimon would say that Aninus Laila is Midorabanan on Yom Kivura. But on Yom HaMisa, Rav Mari, you are arguing that Reb Shimon would say that Aninus Laila is Midoraisa. Well, guess what? Reb Yehuda would agree with that. Reb Yehuda also says, obviously, on Yom HaMisa, Aninus Laila is Midoraisa, and by Yom HaKvura, Aninus Laila is everyone. Reb Yehuda agrees. Aninus on Yom HaKvura, by then is already Midorabanan. Certainly, he would not say that Aninus Laila then is Doraisa. So in which case, basically, according to you, Rav Mari, Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda are not really arguing. Which means, Rav Ashi Rav Mari says, Rav Ashi to Rav Mari, Ve'ela dikatoni, that when Reb Shimon says to Reb Yehuda, like we saw before, Reb Shimon says to Reb Yehuda, Teida sharei amru onein tovavocha pischo ba'erev. Right, the Mishnah said, right, well, we said the Mishnah of Shimon, but they said, Reb Shimon says to Reb Yehuda, well, what about the fact that an Onayn eats Korban Pesach at night? How could he do that if Aninus is Midoraisa? But the thing is, again, Reb Mari is saying that according to Reb Shimon, Yom HaMisa, Aninus Laila is Midoraisa. When he's saying it's Midorabanan, it's only the next day, or it's Yom HaKvura, but Aval lo b'kachim, fine, but he doesn't eat kachim. Nemalei, let Reb Yehuda respond to Reb Shimon and say, Ma pitom. Ka'amina lachona Yom Misa. I'm talking, when I say that Aninus Laila is Midoraisa, I'm talking about Yom HaMisa. Deoraisa. Ve'omart li at Yom Kvura d'Rabbanan, and you are trying to make arguments about Yom HaKvura, that it's d'Rabbanan? Meaning, Rabbi Yehuda is saying to Reb Shimon, he would reply to Reb Shimon and say, Reb Shimon, you agree with me that Yom HaMisa is the Oraisa. That's what I'm talking about. You're not bringing me rise about Yom HaKvura. I'm talking about Yom HaMisa. You're talking about Yom HaKvura. We're talking about apples and oranges. Rather, in order for Reb Shimon's argument to make sense, they must both be talking about Yom HaMisa, and that Reb Yehuda is saying that Aninus Laila is the Oraisa and Yom HaMisa, and Reb Shimon is saying it's the Rabbanan Kasha. That is a question on Rav Mari. Okay, I'm actually going to pause the video for a second to give my brain about 3 seconds to relax, and I will be right back. Abaye Omar says Abaye. Lo kasha, no problem. Kancha meis kodem chatzos, kancha meis la'achar chatzos. Oh, doop-a-doop-a-doo. Says Abaye that it depends when the relative died. Okay, so we're talking about Yom HaMisa. Yudalit is Yom HaMisa, and it depends when the relative died. Right? So Abaye says Aninus. Abaye says that according to Reb Shimon, Aninus Laila is Dirabona. According to Reb Shimon, Aninus Laila is Dirabona. Now, the thing is, the Korban Pesach, of course, is Bein Arbaim. It's in the afternoon. So Yudalit in the morning, it's not yet time to offer the Korban Pesach. So if the relative dies, if Yaakov dies on Tuesday morning, so then it wasn't yet Zman Korban Pesach. So at that point, we won't say that Reuven should, right? If Yaakov died in the morning, we won't say that Reuven should offer the Korban Pesach. Because we'll say, right, what did we say? We said, Shlamim Korbanu, Kol Korbanus, I'm reading from earlier, Kol Korbanus Shu Mevi, Kshu Shalim Mevi, Venu Mevi, Kshu Onayn. Right? We had said that you shouldn't be bringing Korbanus when you are in Onayn, and therefore, if at the time that Yaakov died, it was not yet time for the Korban Pesach is in the afternoon. So therefore we'll say, okay, you know what? Reuven should not be offering the Korban Pesach. However, if in the afternoon, when it was ready Zman, it was ready the time to bring the Korban Pesach, and the chiyuv of bringing the Korban Pesach already kicked in, and then Yaakov dies, so we'll say, look, there was already the chiyuv of Korban Pesach, so Reuven should go ahead and bring his Korban Pesach. Aninus Laila is midrabanan, and it's more important that he should bring the Korban Pesach than that he should practice Aninus Laila midrabanan. Meaning, we're not going to say that because of Aninus Laila midrabanan he shouldn't bring the Korban Pesach. There's already the chiyuv to bring the Korban Pesach. He should bring the Korban Pesach. So Abaye over says Abaye lo kasha kanchemes kodem chatzos kanchemes la'achar chatzos. It depends. Right, so Yudalit is Yom HaMisa, and it depends when Yaakov died. Did he die before Chatzos or after Chatzos? In the morning or in the afternoon? Kodem Chatzos. So before Chatzos in the morning, Dilo Echzi LePesach, which is not yet Zman to offer the Korban Paisich. Chayla Ole Aninus. Well, then the Aninus kicks in, and we say since he's in Onayn, he shouldn't be offering any korbanos, including the korban pesach achar chatzos. But if Yaakov dies in the afternoon, the erze the pesach, which is already the zman, it's already the time, it's already korban pesach time. So lo chayla ale aninus, the aninus will not hold him back, will not prevent him from bringing the korban pesach. Rather, he will bring the korban pesach. Menot tema deshani lon ben kodem chatzos ben lachar chatzos. Now, how do we know that such a distinction should be drawn between before Chatzos and after Chatzos? The sign that we learned in a brisa. Okay, here we go. Lo yitamo mitzvah. That the pasuk says, I believe it's in Parshas Emor. I believe it's at the beginning of Parshas Emor. So of course, Kohanim do not become Tmei Meis. However, says the pasuk, V'lachosa absula akrova elav asher lo oisa leish lo yitamo. But to his sister, who is single, has never been married, he becomes tamei to her. And the point is, he becomes tamei to his close relatives, his immediate, his father, his mother, his sister, his brother. So he becomes tamei to his immediate relatives. And says, this is actually the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, it says, lo yitamo, mitzvah, that not only can he become tamei to her, it's a mitzvah for him to become tamei to his sister, to his immediate relatives. Lo ratza mitamin also, and if he doesn't want to get tamei for them, mitamin also al korcho, we force him to get tamei for the immediate relatives. Umayse b'Yosef hakoin, and there was a maise with Yosef the kohen, shemesa ishto be'erev ha'paisach, that his wife died on erev Pesach. V'lo ratza litami, he didn't want to become tummy. If he becomes tummy, he won't be able to bring the korban Pesach. He wanted to participate in the korban Pesach, therefore he did not want to become tummy. V'nimnu echav ha'kiranim v'tim'u bal korcho, and they were mitameim against his will. They said, you have to become tummy for your wife. So we see in this brisa that you have a person who died on Erev Pesach. So Yud Daled, right? Erev Pesach is Yud Daled, right? Yud Daled is Yom HaMisa. And we are saying, don't bring the Korban Pesach, essentially, right? They're saying, become Tameh, don't bring the Korban Pesach. And yet we have a contradiction. So this is psukim by a Nazir. A Nazir is not allowed to become Tmei Meis, not even to his relatives. Right? The pasuk says, I'm reading some psukim by Nazir, says, Kol yemei aziru la'Hashem al nefesh meis lo yavo. He doesn't become tummy to anybody. He does not become tummy even to his father, his mother, his brother, his sister. Does not become tummy, not to nobody. Now, this excerpt, by the way, this is a brisa that I believe this is the fifth time we were seeing his brisa. It's kind of a technical brisa. We've seen it in Masechta Megillah, Masechta Brachos, Masechta Sanhedrin, and Masechta Nazir, according to the Mesoros Hashas. So this is the fifth time that we are seeing this brisa. Now, okay, this brisa is the context of Nazir. However, interestingly, the Gemara right now is arguably taking it out of context. Basically, the point that it's talking about a Nazir for now is actually not relevant. Even though technically it is talking about a Nazir. Actually, a Nazir is a Kohen Gadol. But anyways, for now, the Gemara is not focusing on those details. We'll get to those details later on the Amud. But however, why does the pasuk say that you can't get that a Nazir can't get tummy to his sister? The thing is, we already know that he's not allowed to get tummy to any of his relatives. So why do you have to say, right? It says, you can't become tummy to anybody. We're going to see later on that nefesh means relatives, mace means even, right, also non-relatives, relatives, non-relatives. He's not allowed to become tummy. So why then do you have to say father, mother, brother, sister? So when it says la'achoso matam lomu, why does it say sister? Of course, he's not allowed to become tummy to anybody, including his sister. Why specify sister? Array. So again, right now the Gemara is not talking about who this is. Is this a Nazir? Is it a Kohen? Is it a Kohen Gadol? Is it all the above? Is it none of the above? We're just saying you have a person who's on his way to slaughter Korban Pesach. It's Yud Daled Nisan in the afternoon, time to offer the Korban Pesach, and you have a person who's on the way to the Beis HaMikdash. He's going to offer his Korban Pesach. Vilamul es beno. Also, he has a son who needs bris milah because, right, umalta osam oz tochabo. Right? Is that what it says? The pasuk says, Be'etzim, if there are people in your household, whether it's sons, whether it is avodim, if there's anybody in your household who needs a bris milah, you must make sure that gets sorted out before offering your Korban Pesach. So basically, you have a person on his way to offer his Korban Pesach on Yud Daled Nisan. V'shama shemeis lo meis, and he hears that, an immediate relative has died. Again, we're not assuming right now that it's necessarily a Nazir, but anybody on their way on Yud Daled Nisan, on their way to the Beis HaMikdash to offer a Korban Pesach, and they find out that a relative died. So they're going to be an Onayn. The question is, should he become Tameh? If you become Tameh, then you're not going to be able to offer the Korban Pesach. What should you do? Do you offer the Korban Pesach or not? Yachol Yitamu, should you get Tameh for your relative? Omart lo Yitamu. The pasuk had said, lo Yitama, don't become Tameh, rather offer the Korban Pesach. So now this is kind of more of the context of the brisa. Well, what if it wasn't a relative? What if it was a meis mitzvah? It doesn't have anybody else to bury them. Well then, don't become tamei to your sister, i.e. an immediate relative, but you would become tamei for a meis mitzvah. Fine. No. So what do we see? What's the contradiction here? What's the shaila? The shaila is that in the first brisa, we had said, right, by Yosef HaKohen, his wife died. They said, you're not offering the Korban Pesach right now. They made him become Tameh, you're not offering the Korban Pesach. And yet over here we say, you're not becoming Tameh, you are offering the Korban Pesach. How come? Why in one brisa we say in Onayn is not going to offer Korban Pesach, and the other brisa we say in Onayn does offer a Korban Pesach? Elalav Shma Mino, it's because Kan Kodem Chatzos, Kan Lacher Chatzos. The answer is that, well, in the first brisa we're talking about before Chatzos. The first brisa we're talking about before Chatzos. The first brisa we're talking about before Chatzos, and there was not yet the time to offer the Korban Pesach. And Yosef HaKohen's wife died. You say you're not offering the Korban Pesach, you're tending to your wife. You're becoming Tameh, you're not offering Korban Pesach. However, the second brisa is talking about after Chatzos. It's talking about after Chatzos, when there was already a Chiyuv Korban Pesach. He's on his way to the Beis HaMikdash to offer Korban Pesach, and he finds out that a relative dies. We say, don't become Tameh. You're an Onayn, but don't become Tameh. Rather, you'll offer the Korban. Offer the Korban Pesach. You're going to eat Korban Pesach tonight. Frag die Gemara, Mimai, how do we know that the distinction between, that the solution to this contradiction between brises is before Chatzos, after Chatzos? Really, I'll tell you that they're both happening after Chatzos. That it's not a distinction of before Chatzos, after Chatzos. Rather, it's simply a machlokes that the first brisa is Rabbi Akiva and the second brisa is Rabbi Shmuel. The Tanya Lo Yitama Rishus de Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva Amar Chova. That pasuk of Lo Yitama, which was by Kohanim, to say that you become Tameh to your sister, i.e. to close relatives. Rabbi Akiva learns that is a chova, it's an obligation. You have to become Tameh to your relatives. And Rabbi Yishmael says it's a rishus, it's an option. A kohen has the option to become Tameh to his relatives. So therefore, we'll say at the first brisa, which says that we made Yosef HaKohen become Tameh for his wife, it's because Lo Yitama, he has to. Whereas the second brisa is Rabbi Shmuel says that it's optional, and therefore, in the second case where the person's on his way to offer his Korban Pesach, and we say don't become Tameh, rather offer your Korban Pesach, it's because that's according to Rabbi Shmuel, who says becoming Tameh for a relative is optional. Lo Sagadaitech, no, that can't be. Direisha da'i Rabbi Akiva katani la. It can't be that the first brisa is Rabbi Akiva and the second brisa is Rabbi Shmuel, because the fact of the matter is the second brisa is Rabbi Akiva. The Tani Rabbi Akiva Omer. That actually, if we look at the broader scope of that brisa, and I had mentioned that brisa is really in the context of a Nazir. The brisa didn't only gave kind of a limited scope of that brisa earlier. Didn't tell us who it was talking about, didn't tell us whose opinion it was. But now we're seeing that it's in fact the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So don't tell me that this is the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. No, this is also the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The Tanya we learn about Rabbi Akiva, Omer says Rabbi Akiva nefesh. That when the pasuk says by Nazir, Koimei azir l'Hashem al nefesh, meis lo yavu nefesh elo krovim meis elo rechokim. A Nazir cannot become Tameh to relatives nor to non-relatives. And then the pasuk says lo aviv enu metame. Why does it say la'aviv? We already know he can't become Tameh to his relatives. What it's saying is, to his father he doesn't become Tameh. That's true. But if there's a meis mitzvah, if a Nazir is walking between hither and yon and finds a dead corpse that needs to be buried, he should tend to that. He doesn't tend to his father. He doesn't become Tameh to his father, but to a meis mitzvah, yes. Le'ima, why does it say to his mother? Haya koyin vu Nazir. If the Nazir was not just another Nazir, but also a koyin, now Kohanim don't become Tameh, and yet even if he was a Nazir and a Kohen, still he would tend to the mitzvah. What do we learn out from his brother? If he was not just a Nazir, not just a Kohen, but he was the Kohen, he was the high priest. Still he would become Tameh to a meis mitzvah, even if he's a Nazir and the high priest. And guess what? What do we learn out from Lachoso? If you have a Nazir who is also the high priest, and not only that, it's Erev Pesach and he's going to offer his Korban Pesach. He's on his way to offer his Korban Pesach. And he heard that somebody passed away. What if it's a Meis Mitzvah? Even if it is the Nazir who is also the high priest, and he's also on his way to offer the Korban Pesach, if there's a Meis Mitzvah, he tends to the Meis Mitzvah. What's the point? The point is that the author of that brisa is Rabbi Kiva. The author of the first brisa is Rabbi Kiva. The author of the second brisa is Rabbi Kiva. So how do we resolve the fact that in the first brisa we said that Yosef HaKohen should become Tameh, should not offer the Korban Pesach, and in the brisa we're saying offer the Korban Pesach? It must be that the distinction is before Chatzos versus after Chatzos. That is the opinion of Abaye. I'm going to drink another shluck of water, and then we are going to look at the opinion of Rava. Rava's opinion is going to be the last kind of major opinion on, at least on today's daf, of this question of how to understand Reb Shimon. Though there are going to be other big discussions, primarily, there are going to be some big discussions kind of nested in Rava's opinion. But here comes Rava's opinion. Rava says that to resolve Reb Shimon, right? Reb Shimon had said at one place that he brings the Korban Pesach, the other place he doesn't bring the Korban Pesach. To resolve this, he says, it's in the afternoon. Says Rava that it depends. So it's all happening in the afternoon. Whereas Abaye said, comes the afternoon, there's the Chiyuv of Korban Pesach, so you memela offer the Korban Pesach. Says Rava, not necessarily, it depends. If they, the Korban Pesach, of course, you have to be part of a Chabur, you have to be part of a group. If their group had already slaughtered the Korban Pesach, well, once you start, go out of Sof and eat the Korban Pesach that night. But if they haven't yet slaughtered the Korban Pesach, then don't offer the Korban Pesach. After all, we had that pasuk that we saw back already on Daf Tzadi Tesam Beis, that was Shalom Korbanos Kol Korbanos Shu maybe Kshu Shalim maybe Venu maybe Kshu Onayn. Look, if he's an Onayn, he shouldn't be offering Korbanos, including the Korban Pesach. Therefore, look, if they already slaughtered the Korban Pesach, okay, fine, go weiter, eat the Korban Pesach tonight. If they haven't yet slaughtered it, don't participate in the Korban Pesach. You're an Onayn. So kan kodem shechachto Zachtu v'zarku olav, kan lachas zachtu v'zarku love. Okay. Fine. Amalei Rav Ada bar Masna the Rava. Rav Ada bar Masna asks a question to Rava. You see, Rav Ada bar Masna is assuming that the main part of the mitzvah of Korban Pesach is the shchitas Korban Pesach, slaughtering the Korban Pesach. You don't technically need to eat it, Rav Ada bar Masna assumes. You don't technically need to eat the Korban Pesach. So now, therefore, if that's the case, Rav Ada bar Masna asks a question, which is, so Rav Ada bar Masna asks an interesting question. He says, look, Rava, the main thing about the Korban Pesach is slaughtering the Korban Pesach. You don't necessarily technically have to eat it. So there, right? I mean, if a person doesn't technically eat the Korban Pesach, as long as he's part of a chabura that offered the Korban Pesach, and I guess other people are eating it, of course, the pasuk, you can't leave anything over till the morning, so somebody's going to have to eat it, but you don't technically need to eat it, is the assumption right now. So therefore, Rav Ada bar Masna asks Rava, why are you saying that if they already slaughtered the Korban Pesach, so then he eats the Korban Pesach that night? I would make the opposite argument, that if they had already slaughtered his Korban Pesach, then Davka say, okay, you're already Yotzei the mitzvah. No need to eat the Korban Pesach. You're an Onayn. You're already Yotzei the mitzvah. Don't eat the Korban Pesach that night. Right? They already slaughtered the Korban Pesach. Just leave it at that. Why tell him to eat the Korban Pesach? He's already Yotzei the mitzvah. So Ravina says, Rav Ada bar Masna, achilas psach me'akva midraba bar Ravuna. Says Ravina that eating the Korban Pesach is important, is ma'akiv. You have to eat the Korban Pesach. To be yotzei the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, says Ravina, you have to actually eat the Korban Pesach, and he learns that from Rabba bar Ravuna, as we're going to learn in just a few minutes. Amalei Rava, and Rava says to Ravada Bar Masna, Tzayis Mai Dikamelach Rabach, you should listen to what Ravina is saying, that there is a mitzvah to eat the Korban Pesach, right, to eat it as well, and therefore, yes, if they already slaughtered the Korban Pesach, he should go weiter and eat it that night as well. If they haven't yet slaughtered it, then he wouldn't offer it. Now, my de Rabba bar Rav Huna. What is this opinion of Rabba bar Rav Huna, where he holds that the Korban Pesach needs to be eaten? The standard that we learn in a brisa. Oh, here we go. Yom Shmua, Yom Lekitas Atzomis, and Yom Kvura. Oh boy, that's exciting times. Moed Katan vibes. Yom Shmua is the day, right? If a person finds out, he gets the message that a relative has passed away within the past 30 days. Okay, right? Before telephones and all that kind of stuff, right? A person finds out a close relative recently passed away within the first 30 days. That's Yom Shmua that we're talking about. Shmua Krova. That's what we're talking about. There's also Yom Akvura, which of course we have been talking about, which is the day that the mace is buried, not necessarily the day that the Yom HaMisa, not necessarily the day that the mace died, but the day that the mace was buried. And Yom Lekitas Atzomis, the day that the bones are collected. Apparently, back in the day, what they would do is a nifter, when a person dies, they would be kind of put in a catacomb and allowed for the body to kind of decompose a bit, and then the bones would be collected and buried in a more permanent burial. So the day of Lekitas Atzomis, so Midrabanon, the day that the bones would be gathered, so that day, not the following night, but that day, one would practice Avelus for that day, the day of Lekitas Atzomis. Now, the Brisa says, Yom Shmua ki Yom Kvura, that the day that one finds out, Yom Shmua, the day that one finds out that a relative, a close relative had recently passed away, ki Yom Kvura is like the day of burial, lemitzvah Shiva v'Shloshim. In terms of Shiva, the halachos of Shiva and Shloshim, those begin to be counted from the Yom Shmua, from the day that one found out. And so the Yom Shmua is like the Yom Kvura in terms of Shiva and Shloshim. However, for the Achilas Psachim, in terms of eating Psachim ki Yom Lekitas Atzamos, it is like the Yom Lekitas Atzamos. That in terms of, if a person finds out on Yud Daled that they found out that recently a relative passed away, can they eat Korban Pesach that night? We say, well, it's like the Yom Lekitas Atzomus, which we said just during the day, the minig is to have minig avelus, but that night already, there is no minig avelus, and yes, you can eat the Korban Pesach at night. The implication being, so the Yom Shmua is like the Yom Lekitas Atzomus in terms of eating Korban Pesach, implying that you can eat Korban Pesach at night for the Yom Shmua and Yom Lekitas Atzomus, but not for Yom HaKvura. That the day that a person, right, that a relative was buried, right? So the day that Yaakov is buried, if Yaakov died on the 13th, was buried on the 14th, the implication is that Reuven would not eat Korban Pesach that night. However, then the Brisa says something peculiar, which is Echad Zeh ve'Echad Zeh, whether we're talking about Yom HaKvura, whether we're talking about Yom Lekitas Atzomis, Tovel, that night, right? So the Onayn, or the person that we're talking about here, goes to the mikvah, and can eat kachim that night, even by the Yom Akvura. So Agufa Kasha, Omart, on the one hand you said, Yom Shmua ki Yom Kvura, the mitzvahs Shiva v'Shloshim. On the one hand we said that the Yom Shmua is like the Yom Kvura, specifically when it comes to counting Shiva and Shloshim, the Achilas Psachim, and yet when it comes to Achilas Psachim, ki Yom Likut Atzamos is like the day that one collects the bones of their relative. Michlal the Yom Kvura afilu la'erev nami lo, implying that on the Yom Kvura you would not eat kachim at night. You would not eat the Korban Pesach at night. Nami lo achli, you would not eat the Korban Pesach at night for Yom Kvura. V'hadar tani, but then we taught echad zeh ve'echad zeh, whether we're talking about Yom Kvura, whether we're talking about Yom Lakitas Atzomis, Tovel v'ocha b'kachim leiv, you can eat kachim at night, and certainly you would be able to eat the Korban Pesach. So how do we understand, how do we resolve this contradiction? Amar Rav Chisda Tanoi. So Rav Chisda says it's taka a machlokas tanoim. It's taka a machlokas tanoim about if there's aninus laila by Yom HaKvur. As we're going to see later on, we're not going to jump straight away into the machlokas tanoim, but we will get to it a little bit later. Rabbi Bar Ravuna Omar, says Rabbi Bar Ravuna, and this is where we're going to learn that Rabbi Bar Ravuna's opinion is that Achilas Pesach, right, that Achilas Pesachim is Ma'akev. So Rabbi Bar Ravuna Omar, he says, Lo kasha, it's no problem. Kan sheshama shmua al meso samuch l'shkias achama, v'chein sheliktu lo atzomis samuch l'shkias achama, v'chein shemeis lo meis v'kovro samuch l'shkias achama, v'chan la'achar shkias achama. Wow. So Rabbi Bar Ravuna says, here's how to understand the distinction between the Reisha and the Seifa. The Reisha, which says that by the Yom HaKvura, you would not eat the Korban Pesach, and the Seifa, which says that by Yom HaKvura, you would eat the Korban Pesach. It depends when you found when you found out about the Shmua, when the bones of the relative, I think I've seen specifically father and mother. I don't know if it's literally father and mother. What about other relatives? I don't know. That happened, right? The Lakitas Atzomis happened right before Shkia. And also the Kvura happened right before Shkia. Basically, the point is, these things were happening on Yud Daled. When is the Korban Pesach going to be in? That night. It's already Tesvav. Of course, the day begins with the night. So when these things are happening before Shkia, so it's happening on a different day. So when the Seifa says that echad zeh ve'echad zeh, whether we're talking about Yom HaKvura, whether we're talking about Yom Lakitas Atzamos, the person would eat korbanos that night, it's because the Lakitas Atzomis, the Shmua, the Kvura, these were all happening before Shkia. That's it, right? So assuming we're talking about the Korban Pesach on Yud Daled. And because it happened on before Shkia, that means that the Kvura was on Yud Daled, and therefore the Seder night is the night following the Kvura. And I believe we're assuming here actually that there isn't even Aninus Laila. There isn't even, this is the night following the Yom HaKvura. The Yom HaKvura is an Onayn Mid'Rabbanan. The night following is completely mutter. It's not even an Onayn Mid'Rabbanan. There's no Aninus Bichlal, so you can partake of the Korban Pesach. But the Reisha, when we're saying that by the Yom HaKvura, he would not eat the Korban Pesach, and that is when the Kvura or the Shmua or the Likitas Atzomus was happening after Shkia on the 14th of Nisan, i.e., basically on the 15th of Nisan, on the same day that you're going to be eating the Korban Pesach. And in that case, by the Onayn, by the Yom HaKvura, basically the Yom HaKvura is happening on the same day. It's happening on the 15th, the same day as the eating of the Korban Pesach, and therefore he would not partake of the Korban Pesach. He would not partake of the Korban Pesach. Now, in terms of Lakitas Atzomis, right, even though we say that Lakitas Atzomis, the day of Lakitas Atzomis, you would be knowing with Avelus, but nonetheless, for Korban Pesach, which is a Chiyuv Karis, it would override the din of Avelus for Lakitas Atzomis. But we say that when it comes to when it comes to Yom HaKvura, it's a technical thing. Basically, by Yom HaKvura, if it happened after Shkia, so basically the same day as the Korban Pesach, you would not eat Korban Pesach when it comes to Yom HaKvura, since in many instances the Yom HaKvura is also the same day as the Yom HaMisa, and in that case it would be Aninus D'Oraisa, so we say even by Aninus D'Rabbanan don't do it. But anyways, it says Rabbi Bar Rav Huna that the big distinction here is between did these events happen before Shkia or after Shkia. When they happen before Shkia, so then by Yom HaKvura the Onayn would eat the Korban Pesach that night. If it happened after Shkia, then the Onayn would not be eating Korban Pesach. So again, Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, Omar says, Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, Lokasha is no problem. Kan sheshama shmua al meso, somuch l'shkias hachama, before shkias hachama. V'chein sheliktu lo atzamu somuch l'shkias hachama. V'chein shemeis lo meis v'kavro somuch l'shkias hachama. If all these things happen before shkias hachama, so then the Onayn would be eating Korban Pesach that night. If it's after Shkias Hachama, then the Onayn would not be eating Korban Pesach. So now the Gemara asks a question. This question is directed towards the fact that we said that Lakitas Atzamas, he eats the Korban Pesach. Right? We said that, right, the Onayn, when it's after Shkia, he says they're not eat the Korban Pesach. But if the Lakitas Atzamas happen after Shkia, we said that even though generally by the Yom Lakitas Atzamas we say that the person is knowing dinim of Avelis and therefore shouldn't be eating Korbanos. We said that by Korban Pesach, because the Zechi of Kar is associated with it, we say that he can eat the Korban Pesach. The thing is, if we're talking about after Shkia Sachama, clearly he had already slaughtered his Korban Pesach. It's after Shkia Sachama on Yud Dalet. Of course, by then, he was already part of Chabura. They already slaughtered the Korban Pesach. All that's left to do is to eat it. So why are we saying that by Likitas Atzamos, this person is eating Korban Pesach that night? Why should he eat the Korban Pesach? He already slaughtered it. He's already yotze the mitzvah, right? Elamai, slaughtering it is not enough. You're only yotze, right? Eating the Korban Pesach is an integral part of the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, and therefore, what we're saying is that when it comes to Korban Pesach, because of the Chiyuv Kares, it overrides the din derabanan of practicing Avelos on the day of Likitas Atzomis, and therefore he even eats the Korban Pesach that night. Right? So l'achar shkias hachama, my da'avahava. Right? They already had slaughtered the Korban Pesach by them. Why by Likitas Atzomis should he eat the Korban Pesach that night? Elash mamina, achilas psachim ma'akva. So rather it must be that achilas psachim is ma'akev, you have to do it, and that is why by Likitas Atzamos he eats the Korban Pesach that night. Rav Ashi Omar, Rav Ashi says, my echod zeh ve'echod zeh ochi kamer. Rav Ashi tries to resolve the question. What was the question? The question was that from the ratio of the Brisa, it implied that by Yom Akvura, the Onayn would not eat Korban Pesach that night, because we said that by Yom HaShmua, it's like Yom Likitas Atzomos by Korban Pesach, implying that by Yom Akvura, he would not eat the Onayn would not eat Korban Pesach at night. And yet we said, Echad Zeh ve'Echad Zeh, they eat Korbanos that night. And we said that Echad Zeh ve'Echad Zeh is whether we're talking about by Yom Akvura, or whether we're talking about Yom Likitas Atzamos. Rav Ashi wants to suggest that, you know what, Echad Zeh ve'Echad Zeh is, it's not Yom Akvura and Yom Likitas Atzamos, rather it's Yom HaShmua, Yom Likitas Atzamos. It's saying that by Yom HaShmua and by Yom Likitas Atzamos, they eat Korbanos that night, but not Yom Akvura. Rav Ashi Omer, my Echad Zeh ve'Echad Zeh, Hachikam, this is what it's saying, Echad Yom Shmua ve'Echad Yom Likut, Tovel v'ochel b'kachim lev, you eat kachim that night, but Yom HaKvura you would not eat kachim that night. That is Rav Ashi's resolution. V'ha the Rav Ashi badusai, but we don't take Rav Ashi's answer seriously. Michdei Allah koi zevozeh mibai lei elishmamina badusai. We take issue with Rav Ashi's opinion, because since we're already in that brisa talking about, we're saying when it comes to Korban Pesach, Yom Shmua is like Yom Likut Atzamos, and then we say v'zeh v'zeh, however, zeh v'zeh, the fact that we're saying however, echod zeh ve'echod zeh, Meaning, if it was still talking about Yom Shmua and Yom Kitas Avanim, would say vizeh vizeh, and also these two, i.e. Yom Shmua and Yom Kitas Atzamos. However, it doesn't say vizeh vizeh. It says echad zeh ve'echad zeh. It's not talking about Yom Shmua and Yom Kitas Atzamos. Rather, it's talking about Yom HaKvura and Yom Likitas Atzamos, and therefore we have to resolve. Alcom, we're saying that on Yom Kvura you're going to be eating korbanos that night. And now, finally, Umay Tanoi. Rav Chizda had resolved his solution to this contradictory brisa was to say it's taka machlokas tanoim about by Yom Kvura if you'd be able to offer korbanos that night or not. So my tanoi, what is this machlokas tanoim? The tana that we learn in the brisa ad mo sai mis Onayn olav. Until what time are you in? Until what point are you in Onayn? After which point you can eat korbanos. Kol ha-yom, all day. Rabbi Omer kol zman shel nikbar, so long as the person has not been buried. Okay, so Tanna Kama says all day, right? So if we're talking about Reuven and Yaakov, right? So all day Reuven would be in Onayn. Rabbi says he's in Onayn until Yaakov is buried. B'mai askinan, what are we talking about? Ilema b'yom misa. If we're talking about the Yom Misa, the day that Yaakov died, mi ika deleis lei the Yom Misa titafis leilo midre rabbanan. 1 second. First of all, doesn't everybody hold that on the Yom HaMisa there would at least be Aninus laila midre rabbanan? Right, over here the machlokas is the Tanna Kama is saying all day. Rabbi Yossi is saying, Tanna Kama is saying all day. Rabbi is saying until the burial. What happened to Aninus Laila? Everybody agrees that there's at least some form of Aninus Laila on Yom HaMisa. Visu, and more so, Rabbi Omer calls man Shlo Nikbar Hakavru Ishtrile. What, and is Rabbi saying that on Yom HaMisa Aninus is only until the burial? Umiika Deleisle Vachrisa Kiomar. Everyone agrees that there's at least that Aninus is at least the day that the person died. Vachrisa Kiomar, that it's like a bitter day. What if a person dies at night? I was wondering that. What if a person dies at night? Then what happens? I'd imagine that Aninus would be through the following day. That's my assumption. That Aninus would be through the following day. What happens in Yerushalayim? Right, in Yerushalayim, they bury people at night. So a person dies, and let's say they bury him 3 hours later in the middle of the night. So the person dies, and they immediately there's Aninus D'Oraisa. When does that Aninus D'Oraisa end? The next night? I don't know. Okay. No, so it cannot be that this brisa is talking about Yom HaMisa. Rav Sheshes, Yom Kvura Koi. So if Sheshes says, yeah, okay, it's talking about Yom Kvura, it's talking about the day of the burial, okay? So if Yaakov died on Monday and they buried him on Tuesday, that's what we are talking about. Maskef Rav Yosef asked the question, Elo, Hadikatani, that which we learn in the brisa, Shomea al Meso, somebody who hears about his mace, Umalakid Atzomis, and somebody who collects the bones of the parents, Tolav Ocha B'Kachim Le'erev, in those cases, by Hashomei Al Meso, by Malakid Atzamos, they can already eat kachim that night. Tolav Ocha B'Kachim Le'erev. Michlal de Yom Kvura, implying what about the Yom Kvura situation? Afilu Le'erev Nami Lo Achil does not eat at night, even on Yom, right? So Yom Kvura would not eat at night. Now, in this machlokes between Tanna Kama and Rebbe, that is neither of the opinions. Tanna Kama says all day there is Aninus. Rebbe says until the burial there's Aninus on Yom Kvura. But who's saying that at night there's Aninus? So Hamani. So who is the author of who's the author of this brisa? It's neither Tanna Kama nor Rebbe. Ella Tritzachi rather explain it like this: Ad Mosai bin Sonin Olav. When is there Aninus? Kol also Ayom Vileilo. According to the Tanna Kama, the Tanna Kama is more stringent and says that Aninus is the day of the Yom HaKvura as well as the following night. Rabbi Omer calls man shelo nikbar, whereas Rabbi says so long as Yaakov has not yet been buried, so Reuven continues being an Onayn. Avon Nikbar, once Yaakov is buried below Leilo, so then the rest of that day, Reuven will continue being an Onayn, but that night he won't be an Onayn. So essentially what Rav Yosef is saying, the Machlokes in Tanakama and Rebbe, is that Tanakama says that on Yom HaKvura, Reuven would be an Onayn midrabanan as well as the following night, whereas Rebbe says Yom HaKvura, Reuven would be an Onayn, but not the following night. Once Yaakov is buried, so then Reuven will no longer be an Onayn comes the nighttime. Amru Akame to Rabbi Yirmiyah, they said this before Rabbi Yirmiyah, Omar, and Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Gavarabak Rav Yosef, Lema Achi, would Rav Yosef really, would somebody, a great person like Rav Yosef, really say this? Lema de Rebbe Likula, to say that Rebbe is Likula, especially because we know that Rav Yosef was a master when it came to the Kiyas, knowing all sorts of brises. Did he not know about this brisa, where clearly Rebbe is the more stringent, is the more stringent opinion, not the more lenient opinion. Vatani, we learn the brisa, Ad Mosai Misonayn Olav, when does Aninus go until? Kozmat she'eno nikbar, afilu mikan va'ad asar yomim. That Rebbe says that Aninus extends so long as Yaakov has not yet been buried, even if it's 10 days later. Reuven will continue being in Onayn for 10 days. Divra Rebbe, that's Rebbe's opinion. V'chachamim ein misonayn elo olav elo also ayom bilvad. Whereas the Chacham say, no, Aninus is only that day. The question is, which day? Clearly, right, the Chacham are not saying that so long as Yaakov, right, Yaakov hasn't been buried for 10 days, and we're saying Reuben's no longer in Onayn. No, of course he's in Onayn until Yaakov is buried. So what exactly is this machlokas? Ela Tutzachi explained it like this: Ad Mosai umis Onayn olav kol oso ayom below leilo. No, rather it means that according to the Chachamim, even if it's 10 days later, Reuven will continue being in Onayn for 10 days, but the day of the burial, 10 days later, he's in Onayn only for the Yom HaKvura. The following night he's already not in Onayn. Rabbi Omer, Kol Zman Shelo Nikbar, V'im Nikbar Tofes Leilo. And once he's buried, he's in Onayn the following night as well. And this is the machlokas that Rav Chizda was talking about. Right? Because here, the Chacham are saying that by Yom HaKvura, he's in Onayn for that day, but not the following night. Rebbe says that he's in Onayn that day and the following night, and therefore, to go back to our brisa, where we said that Yom Ashmua is like Yom Likitas Atzamos for Korban Pesach, implying that by Yom HaKvura he would not offer the Korban Pesach, but then it says that Echazeh v'Echazeh, whether Yom HaKvura, whether Yom Likitas Atzamos, he does offer Korbanos, including the Korban Pesach, so the Tanakama, where you wouldn't offer the Korban, you wouldn't offer that's like Rebbe who says that there's Aninus at night. According to the Sefer, where it says that he would eat the Korban Pesach at night, that's like Tanakama who says that there's no Aninus at night on the Yom HaKvur. Amru de Rava, they said over before Rava. So Rava says, okay, well listen, if Rebbe is saying that when it comes to Yom HaKvura, which is Aninus derabanan, he's saying there's also Aninus Laila derabanan there. Well, midiko Amar Rebbe Yom Kvura Tofes Leilo miderabanan, that in Yom Kvura where Aninus is miderabanan, the night as well there's Aninus Laila miderabanan. Michlad Yom Misa. Well, Rava says, shall we conclude therefore that on Yom Misa where Aninus is mida oraisa, Tofes Leilo mida oraisa, should we say that Aninus Laila and Yom Misa is mida oraisa? But V'savar Rebbe Aninus Laila deoraisa, but that can't be. Rebbe doesn't hold that Aninus Laila is midoraisa. Vatani, we learn in the brisa after all. Hein ayom, that Aharon. This was the dialogue by the Miluim when Nadav and Avihu died, and then there was the shaila of the Korban Chatas that nobody ate, and Moshe Rabbeinu was inquiring about it, and Aharon HaKohen responds, Hein ayom, ani ayom, osir v'layla mutter. He says, look, today, Hein Ani, as Rashi points out, this is like a chiddush. In this particular scenario, where the only Kohanim around are me and my two sons, and we're all Onayns, well, in this case, we'll say, Aninus Laila, we can eat the Korbanis tonight. V'ledoris, Vein Bayom, Vein Balayla also. But in all other generations, where if this particular Kohen is an Onayn, there'll be other Kohens who are not Onayns, well then, the other Kohanim should eat it, but Onayns should not eat it. Meaning there was an exception by the Miluim because Aharon, Nadav, Aharon, Elazar, Yisomar, they were the only Kohanim around. They were all Onayn, so they can eat the korbanos at night by Aninus Laila. But otherwise, for future generations, no, you can't eat korbanos at night as an Onayn. Also did Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says Aninus Laila is also Mida Oraisa for all generations. The only exception being by the Miluim. Rabbi Omer Aninus Laila Eino Midivrei Torah Midivrei Sofim, whereas Rabbi disagrees. And he says that Aninus Laila, even on Yom HaMisa, is only Midir So therefore, the Olam Dirabonon, so rather, Rebbe does in fact hold that Aninus Laila on Yom HaMisa is only Midir not Midoraisa, and yet, Chacham also chizik l'divrei Yosef Mishal Torah. And the Chachamim, there's a taka very interesting. You see, I think the simple way to understand that is to say that the Chachamim were looking out for the Din Dirabanan more than the Din Doraisas. Kilu, they needed more chizik, right, by Din Dirabanan. I think Pashtus, the way to think of how we often think about this is that, well, Din Doraisa, everyone's going to take that seriously. But the Rabbanan, there's almost like an inferiority complex. People, we have to make a point to make sure that everybody takes the Rabbanans more seriously. So as a point, we say that that we're gonna be more chomer by the Rabbanans. And therefore, even though by the Deoraisas, the Torah doesn't say that there is Aninus Laila Deoraisa, and the Chacham say that there is, and by the Rabbanans, even though by the, I think the way to understand is that even though by the Deoraisas, there isn't equally a Deoraisa for Aninus Laila, and yet by the Derabanan, by Aninus Derabanan of the Yom HaKvura, there is equally a Din Derabanan of Aninus Laila, just as powerful as the, right, Kilu. By the Aninus Deoraisa, there's no Aninus Laila Deoraisa, there's only Aninus Derabanan Deoraisa, but by Aninus Derabanan, Yom HaKvura, there's the same level of Aninus that night, Aninus Derabanan at night. So instead of saying that the Chachamim kind of had an inferiority complex, rather, says Rashi, and Tosfos says the same thing, that no, it's that they, right, Chacham also chizik l'divrei Yosef mimasha also sa Torah l'dvarel. It's not that there was necessarily an inferior, like they had to sort of fortify their gezeros. No, it's not that they had to fortify their gezeros. It's just that we find that often the Chachamim made, not just because of an inferiority complex, but because they just tend to have made more chizik around dinim darabanan as they did by deraises. What does Tosfos say? Ein pirusha Yosef mishal Torah de alma elakloma v'chacham also chizik advarim Yosef mimasha asa Torah l'dvara. More than the Torah itself felt the need to make gezeres, siags around chizik for din deraises, the chacham felt more of a need to do so. Why was it? Is it because I don't think the point isn't that it's like an inferiority complex that they need to make a point. But the point is that when it comes to the Rabbanan, we find that the Chachamim tended to put more safeguards to the Rabbanan more than the Torah felt that it needed to make safeguards. Anyways, so when it comes to Yom HaMisa, Rebbe says that Aninus Laila is only Midir, but when it comes to Yom HaKvura, Rebbe says also that it is Midir. Sheesh, friends, happy birthday. That was a doozy of a daf. That was daf Kuf of Masechta Zevachim. But friends, we just broke through some major ground. We are now in daf Kuf Aleph of Masechta Zevachim. That is mind-blowing, friends. Mind-blowing. We learned 100 pages of Masechta Zevachim. Mind-blowing. This could be the hardest Masechta so far. Unbelievable. And breaking through daf Kuf is always a milestone. It's always a milestone. We have 19 pages left in Masechta Zevachim. Unbelievable. Friends, on daf Kuf, we learned about essentially Aninus Laila was really the big sugya. Obviously, it took all sorts of twists and turns, but the big question was Aninus Laila, yes or no. Rabbi Yehuda says by the first night there's Aninus, by Yom HaMisa there's Aninus Laila Mida Oraisa. Reb Shimon says that on Yom HaMisa there's Aninus Laila Mida Rabbanan. It's unclear what they would say about when Aninus is only Mida Rabbanan. So for example, Yom HaKvura, of course everyone agrees, Aninus is only midrabanan and Yom HaKvura. What would Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say about Aninus Laila by Yom HaKvura when Aninus B'chlal is midrabanan? I'm not sure. Rebbe says that Aninus Laila and Yom HaMisa is midrabanan, and by Yom HaKvura there's also Aninus Laila midrabanan as well, says Rebbe. Friends, that was Daf Kuf of Masechta Zevachim. I hope you had a great time. I'll catch you tomorrow. Cheers.